Hi, everybody. It's Mr. Vallejo. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the human body and orientation, which was found in Chapter 1 of the Human Anatomy book, the 9th edition by Pearson. So let's go through those slides together and give you a quick orientation of the human body. All righty. Whether you're taking anatomy this semester or physiology or A&P, which is what anatomy and physiology is often called. What we do is we take a look at the structure of the different things in the human body, different organs, different tissues, and see how they work. In anatomy, we emphasize the structure. So there's a lot of memorization in an anatomy course. In physiology, there is more of a reliance on explaining how that structure works. So function is important in the physiology class and takes precedence over anatomy. Honestly, you can, if you don't know the name of something, you can still understand how it works. So that is the importance of function. But in an anatomy course, seems to be a lot of memorization. But if you were to take an anatomy course before a physiology course, that is helpful because then you know what the structure is, and then you can understand the function. All that to say, though, when you do take an anatomy course, there is a significant amount of studying the function as well. You don't just memorize terms and where they are, but you know a little bit about the function, but you'll learn even more in a physiology class. Now, in an anatomy class, there are all kinds of different branches of anatomy. There's gross anatomy, we're just learning the parts. But if you take a look at the third bullet, it says other branches of anatomy. The branch of biology called developmental biology has an emphasis on anatomy, and also embryology is very closely related to developmental anatomy. And then as we study diseases and such, that is pathological anatomy. Radiographic anatomy has to do with taking images, X-ray images, for example, to help us diagnose and understand what's happening in different diseases. When you study morphology, that is a branch of anatomy. It says functional morphology. You may be familiar with the prefix morph when the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers would turn into different objects, like the Black Ranger would turn into Triceratops. He would say, "It's morphin' time." And to morph, it means to change forms. So the study of morphology is the study of the different shapes or the different forms that something might have. All righty. Histology is often the first thing you study in an anatomy class. Histology is microscopic anatomy. This is important because we know that the cell is the basic unit of life. Everything that's alive is made up of cells. So the cell is the smallest living unit. To best understand a structure or an organ or a tissue, we often start with the cell and see if the cell has any unusual features that help the tissue or the organ do its job. So it says here on the third bullet, a histologist examines cells, tissues, and organs. Example, a specimen that has an epithelium overlying some smooth muscle, which is part of an organ. So there are different layers, and those different layers are called levels of organization, or in this slide here, it's called the hierarchy of structural organization. And you can see it's a pyramid, but it starts at the very bottom with the smallest structures, and it works its way up. So the three bulleted structures are for three bulleted items here are for these structures right here. So at the chemical level, you have atoms, which together, atoms of different elements may form molecules, and the molecules come together and form cells. Remember, previously I said the cell is the basic unit of life. And then cells that work together to do something, that have a common function, those are called tissues. Well, tissues that work together are called organs, since they're a discrete structure made up of more than one tissue. So then we have organs here, and then organs that work together for a common purpose. That's called an organ system. And then you and I are made up of, some would say 12, some say 13 different organ systems. Organ systems working together form an organism. So you and I are individuals or organisms, and you represent the species. If you're looking at it from an ecological point of view rather than an anatomical or physiology point of view, sometimes we say we have chemicals, cells, tissues, organs, organ systems. Then the organism can, sometimes you write that as individual or the species level. And an ecologist would expand this diagram even more than that, and you would have on top of an organism, you would have a population, a bunch of species, a bunch of individuals of the same species that work together or are found together in a certain area. That's a population, which expands to a community. Some would also put in what's called landscape, and after that, you have probably something you've already heard about, the biosphere. Some would consider the ecosystem a little bit below that, but some people call it the biosphere is the whole area where life is formed or life is found on Earth. And then there are different areas, different ecosystems. Some actually are aquatic, but some on land, they often also called biomes. So we've probably heard some of these terms in different classes, such as a biology class, a straight biology class, or if you've taken environmental science, you may have studied biomes in that sense there. Here's just a graphic that shows you the relationship between the different structural levels, and you can see it goes from the top down instead of from the bottom up, that we saw in the pyramid. And because that's the case, sometimes you see this represented in textbooks as an upside down triangle, which would match this very nicely, because the different levels you can see for a physiologist or for an anatomy or physiology class, you see this is very small, the chemical, and then it goes cellular, tissue, organ system, then finally at the organismal or the individual layer that might be a little wider and give you a different diagram, but they're very similar, whether you put the words in the base upside down, right side up, but you get the idea, they all kind of lead to each other. So here's a few slides that tell us about the different systems that we find in the body and that we would study in our anatomy and physiology class. There's the integumentary system, which is basically your skin, and says here forms external body coverings. And there are other qualities and other jobs that the integumentary system does. Like, I was right next to an assisted living home this past weekend, and there was a guy in a wheelchair, and it was good to see, because what he wanted to do was not because he was in a wheelchair, but he wheeled himself out into the sun, and he just wanted to sit out in the sun for 20 minutes. And good thing, because your skin is the part of the integumentary system, and then your body will make vitamin D when exposed to sunlight for short periods of time. Right. Of course, there's the skeletal system, which is provides us with a framework for the muscles. That's where your bones are. I mean, your bones are your skeletal system. As you know, you have 206 bones in the body. Most of those are in the hands and the feet, but some of the larger bones are known to have the blood cells formed within them, also storage of minerals like calcium in the skeletal system. And there's the muscular system, which is involved in locomotion, obviously, and other things also. These are all your muscles. Some you have control over, some you don't. So we have muscles with stripes or striations on them. So we call those striated muscles, which are voluntary muscles. And then we have some muscles, smooth muscles, like those of your stomach, your intestinal system, and those smooth muscles are not under your conscious control. So you don't have to think about digesting your food as you're digesting your food. So there you go. Those are the muscular system, the nervous system made of nerves. Often in an anatomy class, you would start with the study of this neuron and see that the neuron is made up of a cell body called the soma, and attached to the soma you have these little hair-like structures called dendrites that receive the message, bring it to the central main part of the cell body, the soma, the nucleus, then takes all the information, and if there is a go message, another message goes down a larger structure called the axon. Sometimes those are very long. They can go all the way from your back, all the way to your toes. So it's a very long axon, which delivers an electrical message down that axon, which is still part of the nerve cell, to different parts of the body. Speaking of delivering messages, we have the endocrine system, which is made up of hormones, and hormones are chemicals that are made in one part of your body that have an effect in another part of the body. You can see there are different organs that are involved with the endocrine system, and as we study anatomy, we take a look at all the different hormones that have an effect on the body, including estrogen and progesterone and testosterone and all of these different hormones that are made in one part of the body and have an effect in another part of the body as they travel through the bloodstream. Speaking of blood, blood goes through the blood vessels. And so in anatomy and physiology, we of course study the blood vessels. The ones that go toward the heart are veins, and the ones that lead away from the heart are the arteries. And then there's smaller, much smaller in diameter blood vessels called your capillary, your capillaries, and that's where you have a lot of movement from the bloodstream out to the rest of the body, going into the fluids that are part of your body. We call those the interstitial fluids, and so that is the cardiovascular system. You have the lymphatic system. People sometimes don't realize that we have the lymphatic system. It is fluid in the body, but it's not your blood. And so things that leak out or come out of the blood system go into your body fluids, and your lymphatic system picks them up. As you can see in the first bullet, it says it picks up fluid and some cells that are leaked from the blood vessels and puts them back into the blood vessels. And so there's another series of vessels in your body. It's the lymphatic system, and you probably are familiar with some of the junctions of those tubes, those lymphatic vessels, because those are your nodes. So when you get sick and you have maybe you have the mumps, and you feel a swelling of a node right here, and that's the lymphatic system. And sometimes things get stuck in the lymphatic system and at those junctions, and that causes the swell. People who get lymphatic cancer, unfortunately, what happens sometimes is when a cancer cell goes off, and your cancer cells metastasize and break off the original tissue and go in the bloodstream. Then they go through the circulatory system, get picked up by the lymphatic system, and as you're going through there, sometimes they'll get stuck and clog up right at those nodes. So someone might get lymphatic cancer. Lymphatic cancer is one of the tougher cancers to cure because oftentimes it's a secondary cancer. It's one that started somewhere else, and then the cells broke off and then got stuck in the lymphatic in the nodes in the lymphatic system. Respiratory system is where gas exchange takes place, carbon dioxide, oxygen, typically the lungs. You see as we study vertebrate physiology, there are things like frogs where 40% of their oxygen is exchanged through their wet skin. So it's interesting to compare some of these things in human physiology to other vertebrates. And then with the digestive system, when we have our foods that are broken down as they go through our bodies, and this is a study of not just the organs, but also of the chemicals that are involved in the digestive system, starting with the mouth. And when we chew up our foods and have this saliva, and the saliva, there's an enzyme called salivary amylase, and starts the whole thing. And then we have different enzymes that are added to the food as it goes all the way through your digestive system. There are changes in pH along the way. The stomach is more acidic. Your intestines are more basic. You have different places where there's a muscle that cuts off some of the tubes, if you will. You have the food tube, the esophagus, and right at the end of that, in between the esophagus and the stomach, there is a set of circular muscles called a sphincter. And so you have a sphincter there. At the end of the digestive system, you also have a couple of sphincters there as well. One that you can control and one you can't control. So that is the study of digestive system. You'll learn all about that. Then there's a urinary system, which is a study of the kidneys and the smaller parts of the kidneys. The kidneys are made up of these structures called nephrons. And so as you study a nephron and understand the nephron, you can see different concentrations that are involved and all these different processes that occur at the tissue level and even at the cellular level that are important to understand as we take a look at the urinary system. It's not just urine is made and then it's stuck in a bag called the bladder and then it comes out. No, there's all kinds of other things that happen. And most of your water is saved as we go through this filtering process. So the urinary system is important there. And then there's the male and female reproductive systems. Again, not just the structure itself, but also the study of the hormones. And we'll take a look at, in an anatomy class, we'll take a look at the hormones involved, for example, in the female menstrual cycle. There's just an interplay of at least 4 different hormones that need to come in at different concentrations in order to regulate the process of ovulation and menstruation. All righty, so those are the different systems that are found in the body, but there are different cavities, and I need to mention those. There's the thoracic cavity. It says here it's divided up into 3 parts. 2 of them are the cavities where the lungs are. First bullet says 2 lateral parts, each containing a lung surrounded by a pleural cavity. And then we have the mediastinum, and that's the heart, and the pericardial cavity that has the heart, but it also includes the food tube, the esophagus, and the tracheum, that's your breathing tube. And then we also have the abdominal cavity, but the study of the abdominal cavity is often tied with the study of the pelvis or the pelvic region or the pelvic cavity. So here's the term here, the abdominopelvic cavity is what some textbooks will call it. And as you can see on this picture here, they are separate cavities, but the study of them may be linked together like that. So here's one cavity. There's a thoracic cavity. If you were to turn this picture 90 degrees, you would see the mediastinum right there. And then you have the vertebral cavity and cranial cavity as part of the dorsal body cavity. One of the characteristics of vertebrates is that they have a dorsal hollow nerve cord, and that is what is being represented right there. When you study anatomy and physiology, there are terms to understand, and here are some paired terms. We have the superior and inferior, the anterior, posterior, the medial and lateral, and the superficial or deep. Best to take a look at it the diagram right here, and you can see the superior is toward the head going that way, and the inferior is away from the head end or toward the lower part. So as you can see, these are relative terms and they are opposite terms. Lateral means going off to the side. Medial means going towards the middle. Proximal means closer to the middle of the body, toward the trunk. And then distal is going out to the outside. Like my finger is made up of 3 sections. You have one that's on the outside. That's the distal section. And then we have over here, we have the medial section, which is right here. And then this one is approximately close to the body. So this is the proximal. So the proximal, the medial, and the distal portion of a finger right there. Right, here's some other terms also. Ventral and dorsal are some basic terms that are used more when you do in vertebrate physiology, comparative physiology. We talk about the backside of an animal that walks on all 4s. So if you had a frog that you were dissecting, you would put it in a tray and put it on its dorsal side. And so that's ventral side, its belly side. Sometimes we say its belly side is facing up. So here, here's dorsal here. And then we have superficial and deep. Deep means away from the body surface. So superficial as a term means going toward the body surface. Deep means away from the body surface. All right, and then there are different planes. And so there's the median plane, the parasagittal plane, and again, best to see it in the pictures, frontal plane and the transverse plane. You know, those different planes when you dissect an organism, specifically a human. If you're looking at a plane this way, if you were to cut through the center of a cadaver of a body in this orientation, that's a median plane. There's the frontal going across laterally, and then over here cutting the organism in the middle, that's a transverse plane. You can see there's different representations that are possible if you take a look at those, look at the different structures using a different planes. All right, so we'll see much more of that later in the anatomy and physiology classes, but it's just an introduction to these terms and these planes and the different systems that we have in the human body. All right, so I'm Mr. Vallejo. Thanks for coming to class today, and we'll see you next time. All right, bye-bye.